Describe in single words only the good things that come into your mind. About your mother?
My mother?
Yeah.
Let me tell you about my mother.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Universe Channel. I'm Ryan, and if you're like me, you're super excited to watch Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner 2049, which is releasing 35 years after Ridley Scott's original film. And if you're really like me, you're hitting that disc 4 of the Esper soundtrack with all the Blade Runner white noise really hard before you go to bed every night. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the Universe Channel. We cover all sorts of great shows and movies. Right now we've got Star Trek Discovery, Channel 0, and Mike Rizzo's full review of Blade Runner 2049 just around the corner. Coming right up here, I've got some background on the original Blade Runner with no spoilers, then a story recap with spoilers, and then some of my own thoughts to get you up to speed for Blade Runner 2049. The first Blade Runner film was released in 1982, directed by the visual master Sir Ridley Scott, and was based on the post-apocalyptic 1968 novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. Dick's novel weaves a convoluted tale of struggle between humans and machines, consumerism, paranoia, and for-profit religious enterprise. Many of the themes and elements of the novel were left by the wayside by Scott and writers Fancher and Webb Peoples to imagine a gritty, ahead-of-its-time tech-noir cyberpunk detective story. In many respects, like most PKD movies, Scott's film was a faithless adaptation that instead was the most visually striking and viscerally compelling science fiction film of the time. It was the first picture since Fritz Lang's Metropolis to fully realize a technologically advanced urban space of the near future. 35 years later, Blade Runner's handling of machine life concepts are somewhat shallow, as are many of the characters. Harrison Ford's detective also gets a bit rapey, which in 1982 might have felt like a playful send-up of hard-boiled film noir masculinity, but today is kinda creepy. What isn't dated is that the film is visually and sonically amazing. If you haven't seen it before, you owe it to yourself to find a theatrical screening, rent it, or stream it online. Now, this is where things get a little bit tricky. There are as many as 7 different versions of Blade Runner out there. So, which should you watch? The original American theatrical release was heavily compromised by the studio and is most famous for a very campy, film noir-style detective voiceover from Harrison Ford throughout the film.
They don't advertise for killers in a newspaper. That was my profession. Ex-cop.
And some weirdly out-of-place helicopter shots purchased from Stanley Kubrick. Avoid this at all costs. The 2 most common versions available are the 1993 director's cut and the most recent 2007 final cut, which involved some major alterations to the film but is meant to be closest to Scott's intended vision. To me, the latter goes a bit too far in changing the film, like the weird special editions of the original Star Wars trilogy.
I bet you have.
But certainly does not go as far as directing 2 multi-million-dollar revisionist movies that reverse the legacy you yourself created.
I'll do the fingering.
To my taste, the director's cut is the money cut. But if you're new to Blade Runner, either version will do. One note of caution, many online streaming versions cut down the widescreen image to fit TVs. Trust me on this, the entire frame in this film deserves to be seen. Now then, let's go to the colonies.
The chance to begin again in a golden land of opportunity and adventure.
Here's a breakdown of the key story elements of the original 1982 Blade Runner. Now, this is spoiler territory, so if you don't want spoilers, get your ass to Mars. The year is 2019. Harrison Ford plays a down-and-out, alcoholic, elite ex-Blade Runner. Basically, an illegal android hunter who gets blackmailed back to work by his racist, Luddite former captain.
Christ, that critter could look almost as bad as that skin jog left on the sidewalk.
The case is to hunt down 5 replicants, androids that are illegal on our planet, who have found their way down to Earth and are infiltrating the Tyrell Corporation, the company that manufactures replicants, for unknown reasons. I'm sorry, I meant 4 replicants, not 5.
That's not 6.
1 + 2 + 2 + 1.
Deckard first meets Eldon Tyrell, the designer of robotic minds. He also meets Rachel, a replicant that doesn't yet know she's not human.
She's beginning to suspect, I think.
Suspect? How can it not know what it is?
Commerce is our goal here at Tyrell. More human than human is our motto.
Tyrell explains that giving replicants memories softens the difficulties of, well, being alive. The existential, what it means to be human notes are really the core of Blade Runner, and it's the great bind that actually ties all the characters together. If there is one truly great bond about all of the film's characters, it is that they are struggling with the burden of consciousness. The second act of the film develops as follows. We are introduced to Roy Batty, the severe but thoughtful replicant leader who is dying because of a pre-designed 4-year lifespan and is in search of a cure.
I designed your eyes.
Sure. If only you could see what I've seen with your eyes.
Rachel and Deckard strike up a relationship despite her existential difficulties in coming to terms with being a replicant. In one tender moment, she plays the piano from memory, memories that belong to Tyrell's niece. It's actually a beautiful scene until it gets aggressive. It's also one of the better scenes for replicants in the movie because sense of self is tied to identity, nostalgia, and emotion instead of an animal need to survive. Deckard also takes out 2 of the 4 replicants. First, Zora, a tough combat replicant who he guns down in a rainy foot chase, followed quickly by Leon, who is about to punch his ticket, but Rachel recovers Deckard's gun and offs Leon herself. Zora's death is probably the one undebatable improvement in the final cut. In all previous versions, the stunt double who went crashing through the glass looked comically different from actress Joanna Cassidy. Meanwhile, Roy has sent Pris, a pleasure replicant, to seduce and befriend JF Sebastian, the quirky recluse who designs replicant bodies and lives with his own robot toys.
Home again, diggity dig. Good evening, JF.
Evening, fellas.
When Roy joins them, he implores JF to help him meet Tyrell because he and Pris are dying and need help. Roy, who is super intelligent, exploits an ongoing chess match between Sebastian and Tyrell to gain access to Tyrell.
Bishop to king, 7, checkmate, I think.
Got a brainstorm, huh, Sebastian? Milk and cookies kept you awake, huh? Let's discuss this. You better come up, Sebastian.
In one of the most powerful scenes in the film, Roy pleads with Tyrell for a solution to his impending death, but there are no options, and Tyrell instead tries to appeal to Roy's sense of accomplishment. This has almost always been my favorite scene in the film. I love the gravity of it. The suffering machine has journeyed to his maker in the hopes of extending his life. He is burdened by conscience and anger. However, I have to say this, my appreciation of the scene hinges on one word of dialogue that is different between the final cut and other versions of the film.
I want more life, Father.
In previous non-TV versions of Blade Runner, Roy says fucker.
I want more life, fucker.
To me, it's a stronger scene for it. We already know that he's come to see his maker, and the word father is infused with reverence absent from the scene. I prefer fucker precisely because it lacks reverence. It says, I'm not impressed that you made me. I'm disappointed that you put me in this situation, this existence. That's also the level at which Tyrell engages Roy's intellect.
Nothing the god of biomechanics wouldn't let you in heaven.
In the final sequence of the film, Deckard goes to Sebastian's home where he finds and murders Pris, but not before she beats him up a bit. Then Roy returns and engages in a suspenseful cat-and-mouse game after breaking Deckard's fingers. The fight culminates on the rooftop in the rain, where Roy spares Deckard his life before waxing philosophical with one of the most memorable speeches in sci-fi history.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
The film is pretty much over there. Roy lets go of a dove, which flies up into a blue sky or a dark city, depending on which version you're watching, and Deckard and Rachel run away together. Moving on, it's important to mention the very popular time-wasting conversation among Blade Runner fans, which is whether Deckard is a replicant. There are tons of explanations out there, and the filmmakers have intermittently denied or confirmed the idea. One of the writers, Hampton Fancher, would prefer it be ambiguous, while Scott thinks Deckard is a replicant, and Harrison Ford insists he's human. Deckard was also human in the original novel. 2 scenes are most crucial to the theory. A daydream Deckard has of a white unicorn, and the final scene where Deckard finds an origami unicorn left by Gaff at his door when he flees with Rachel. The implication is that Gaff knew he was a replicant. I personally prefer Deckard as human because it better suits the context of parallel struggles between humans and replicants that are central to Blade Runner. Let me know what you think in the comments. Before I let you go, I want to say a few things that I want and don't want from the long-awaited sequel, Blade Runner 2049. Rather than lazy AI fear-mongering, I want 2049 to continue the exploration of the value of machine intellect. The original film only barely goes there in a few moments with Rachel and the last scenes with Roy at the end. Many good films have gone there since, and 2049 has an opportunity to reassert the franchise as an authority. I'd like to see more statements about or themes including matters of class and position and consumerism. Blade Runner's design is filled with commerce and advertisements blaring and assaulting downtrodden people trying to get to one place or another in an unending torrential downpour. I'd like to see more of that lived-in setting too. Blade Runner is one of the only science fiction films that makes its environment feel real and used. Too many future stories just are clean and sterile. To that end, the last thing I want is Ridley Scott's quality design, cinematography, and sound. Roger Deakins is one of the greatest living cinematographers, Dennis Gassner is a proven designer, and Hans Zimmer is one of my favorite composers. As long as the central vision is good, we should be in good hands. Now, here are a few things I don't want. Real quick, those things are too much action, the original Blade Runner was slow, only white people, teaching a robot to be human, and lastly, a dumb evil villain. Seriously though, Roy Batty wasn't evil and had no evil intentions. He was looking out for his friends and just wanted more life, fucker. The last thing I don't want is Ridley Scott level revisionism. I don't appreciate all the changes in the final cut, and if you haven't figured out already, I abhor the swift strokes of canon destruction Scott dealt to the beloved Alien franchise across 2 films.
I'll do the fingering.
I think that's about as much as I could possibly say about Blade Runner. Now, let me know what you think of the original movie and the new movie down in the comments. You can always hit me up on Twitter, my handle is in the description. And don't forget to come back for Mike Rougeau's full review of Blade Runner 2049 just around the corner.